Welcome to FHIR Shorthand. This subject is closely related to my presentation on FHIR profiling and FHIR implementation guides. So if you've not seen that presentation, I would urge you to check that out first. My name is Patrick Jameson. I'm the product manager for Iris for Health, and I work closely with our FHIR stack and also interoperability. Let's do a quick review of what a FHIR implementation guide typically includes. First, it includes profiles. Profiles define how to use FHIR resources and data elements to meet specific use cases or requirements. They may constrain the base FHIR resource to accommodate the needs of a particular system, organization, or healthcare domain. They frequently include extensions. Extensions provide a way to add custom or domain-specific data to FHIR resources. Implementation guides may define specific extensions to enhance the standard resources. Thirdly, they include value sets. Value sets define sets of codes used for specific data elements, helping to ensure consistency and interoperability in data exchange. Implementation guides also provide examples. These examples are FHIR resources and data exchanges which could be helpful for implementers to understand how to use FHIR in practice. The guides also contain detailed instructions on how to use FHIR resources, including any specific business rules or considerations relevant in the healthcare domain for which they are being applied. FHIR Shorthand, often abbreviated as FSH, is a domain-specific language looking to define and create implementation guides and profiles. Here are some of its key features. It's an expressive language. FHIR Shorthand provides a human-readable and expressive language for defining profiles, extensions, and other FHIR artifacts. It simplifies the process of creating structured FHIR artifacts, making it easier for domain experts and implementers to specify how FHIR resources should be used in specific contexts. Consistency. It enforces consistency in the creation of a profile and extensions by following a well-defined syntax and set of rules. This helps ensure that the FHIR profiles and extensions adhere to the FHIR standard and can be used reliably for interoperability. FHIR Shorthand includes tooling. It's a way in which you can validate, for example, that a profile includes the rules correctly or the syntax correctly in using FHIR Shorthand. And we'll see one of these tools called Sushi that we're going to use in building our own guide. Versioning. FHIR Shorthand allows for the management of different versions of profiles and extensions, and this makes it easier to maintain and evolve implementation guides over time. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that the creators of FHIR Shorthand, the MITRE Corporation, they love fish puns, hence FSH or fish. Nevertheless, in my opinion, FSH is the leading tool for building FHIR profile and implementations guides, as we'll shortly see. FSH has excellent tooling, including a plugin for Visual Studio Code, which we'll soon use. Other tools don't offer the ease of use or power in creating profiles and implementation guides. There are many advantages, especially like readability, and also the ability to easily version and track guides with source control like Git. Only a few packages are needed to use FSH with Visual Studio Code. And one of these packages, if you want to publish an implementation guide, is Jekyll, which is a Ruby package that can be a little tricky to install. But again, this is only needed if you want to publish your IG guide. but I'm going to show you that in this demonstration. There are only a few simple steps that you need to create a FHIR implementation guide. You're going to author one or more of these .fsh files. We're going to run this tool Sushi that's going to validate that we have correct FHIR shorthand rules implemented. And then finally, we're going to run the IG publisher that'll publish this as an implementation guide, and you'll get to see exactly how to do this. Sushi sets up a skeletal structure of the project with all the folders and files that you will need. So here we're going to use this interactive tool at the command line to create an example IG or an example implementation guide. Here's what Sushi generates in terms of a template structure in Visual Studio Code. And we could start then from this template structure. Now there's some ground rules here. White space in FSH is not counted. We use the star character quite a bit. This is used to designate an FSH rule. Another category we're going to use quite often is the dollar character, which sets up an alias. This is very useful, for example, to specify the system of a codable concept, which could be a long string, and it's going to save us a lot of typing. The pound symbol is a shortcut to a code in a code system. So we're going to see examples of that, for example, when we use SNOMED. Now here are the parts of a profile, the three parts. The first section is the declarations section. Declarations are always the first statement in an FSH item. There are 11 declarations in FSH. Frequently used declarations that we'll be using include profile, extension, value set, and instance. Note the keywords. We start off specifying the base resource or implementation guide. Then we include the ID, title, and description. The rule section defines constraints on the FHIR elements that we've talked about in profiling, such as cardinality. So let's create a FHIR profile to make this easier to see what are the steps from a hands-on perspective, creating your own implementation guide. So I was browsing the medical literature on heart disease, and I came across this paper that I thought would be great for creating a new observation resource that had been profiled. And so that's what we're going to use in this. We're going to look at the heart rate recovery after 10 seconds where we cease exercising, and we're going to take an observation of that. So I'm going to start out in defining a value set and then use aliases so that I could describe the codes in this value set rather easily. So I'm going to start out with this value set called heart rate recovery. Notice I have to give it an ID, a title, and a description. And then I could add my own codes to this value set. And we're going to make these very simple. We're going to look at things like the heart rate recovery after exercise after 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, etc. Now notice I've set up in this heart rate recovery some aliases. The $HRR is going to be to our code system, which happens to be www.intersystems.com/HRR. And I'm also going to set up an alias to this observation category from HL7. Then we're going to go create our profile. Our profile is going to use as the parent resource the observation resource. We're going to give it an ID, HRR.FSH, and then a title and a description, and then some rules. And we're going to go into these rules one by one. We're also going to use Sushi to validate that our profile is correct. And you're going to see as I go through this, I'm going to show you that all warts and all, where I'm going to make mistakes, and we'll see what the output is from Sushi and then how Sushi could help us correct generating our profile. We'll also add an extension, interpretation certainty. And so we're going to constrain this, and here's our description, the certainty of the interpretation. And we're going to limit the value only from the definition of codable concept. And it's got to be one of these several values that we're going to draw from the SNOMED code set. And then you're going to see these rules. I know this is fairly low contrast. We'll cover these in just a little bit here. Finally, we'll run Sushi again to see if we've had any errors. And then we're going to also create an example instance, which is required if we want to publish any implementation guide. We must have one example of our profile to publish a guide. So here's the simple steps for creating a FHIR implementation guide. We're going to create a directory, which we're going to call input cache. We're going to run Jekyll against this directory, and then we're going to download the IG publisher and run this command _update publishers.sh or bat if you're on Windows. And then we'll run this shell script. And that'll generate the guide, and you'll see this nice guide come out that'll show you a snapshot or text summary of the guide and a differential that will show you which elements must have been supported that we designated as had to be supported. So additionally, if you want to create your own guides, a great way to do this is to use this tool that I'm showing on screen here, FSH Online. It will help compile any FSH code that you write, and you can test it rather easily. So that's enough talking. Let's do a demo, and I think you'll see very clearly how you could create your guide. So here I'm at the command line, and I'm installing the FSH Sushi system. It's a number of packages. No vulnerabilities found, and now I could create my guide. And so notice I have to answer some prompts here. I'm going to say HRR IG for my guide, give it an ID and a canonical URL for it. And our publisher name and our publisher URL, providing all of this is just an example. So now we've created this, and we could see that we have a skeletal system here that shows you all the folders and packages. So we're going to rename this, because it's not a patient guide, it's our heart rate guide, HRR, and this example that they gave when we installed the system is irrelevant, so we're just going to get rid of it. And now we could start to type our first FSH commands. And I think the easiest thing to do is set up the alias first. So I'm going to type $HRR, and I'm going to set that to our system reference. And I'm going to start to now create our first value set called heart rate recovery. I have to give it an ID. It could be the same thing as the title if we want. The title must be in quotes, heart rate recovery. And I need to give it a description. So I'm saying these are the coded values for heart rate recovery. Now let's start to add some rules. We use the star, and we're including $HRR, remember that's our alias, #001, that's a reference to our first code. We'll call this heart rate recovery after 10 seconds. And we need to do this again for all the other values in our code set here. And I'm going to just paste them in just so you won't be bored. And I'm going to save this, and now I could run the Sushi tool to see, hey, do I have a valid value set? And success. We see we have one value set and we have no errors. Perfect. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, I'm going to put in this SNOMED alias, and I'm going to interpretation confidence, run sushi again, and we now have two value sets. Excellent. So you can see I made two value sets, no problem. Let's make our first extension, interpretation certainty, and we're going to add an ID here, and we just call this interpretation certainty ID. It doesn't really matter that much. And then a title, and then we have to have a description. The certainty of the interpretation is correct. Very simple. So our rules. So we're going to say it's a value, and it's a value because it's an extension. We're going to limit this to only codable concepts, okay? And we're going to say that that value also must come from the value set that we just, confidence interval we just created. Now, let's run this and see, oh, we got an error someplace. What did we do wrong here? Well, we could see that, notice this, it was expecting a string for the title, and we didn't put it in quotes. So now we can save it and run it again, and hopefully this time it'll be correct. And so this is where sushi comes in really handy. Okay, so that extension now is correct, no errors. Sushi shows its value. Now I'm going to create the profile, our profile, the parent is going to be the observation resource. I'm going to give it an ID, HRR profile, got to give it a description, okay, profile to capture heart rate recovery, okay, the heart rate recovery observation. And we need to, now we could provide some rules here. So the subject must be supported, right? Also, the category of the observation, I'm going to say must be supported. And how about the code for the heart rate recovery? That must be supported. And the values, the certainty value, must be supported. Okay, so MS, must support. Okay, so let's check out other constraints. Subject. Well, subject is only going to be a reference to the patient. So we're going to specify that in this rule here. The subject has to be present. So we're going to say the cardinality is fixed, 1.1. Only one subject, no more than one subject. The code has to come from the heart rate recovery code set, and that is required. The value, this value is going to come from the it's going to be a quantity. It has to be from a quantity, and our interpretation has to be 1-to-1 again, meaning that it must be present. It must be present in this profile. So let's check out sushi. Oh, we got an error. So what did we do wrong? Okay, resolve quantity is not a value URI. So we have to specify here that it's only the value X is only a quantity. So let's run this again, and hopefully we're going to have no errors. Yes. So we've now defined one profile, one extension, several value sets. So what else do we need for a implementation guide? Well, we need an instance. Okay, we need an example instance. And here I'm picking Thomas Hart. And let's take a look at this. And we also need an example instance of a heart rate recovery example of our profile. So Thomas Hart is the subject, the patient, but we're going to give it a code, a status, beats per minute interpretation, and we'll also have the extension all coded in our example. So there we go. We have now a profile. We have an example. We've defined all these different rules. We're now in a good position to basically publish this, our first implementation guide. Now we have to download a few things to get this to work, and I probably will speed this up a little bit because it takes time to download all the resources to use the IG publisher. And now we need to update our scripts, and this, I think, is pretty fast, this process. So now we're ready to go. We're ready to use the Gen 1 shell script in this example, and we'll get our guide. And this does not take too long, and we'll fire our core version 4. And it's loading all our packages, terminology, getting our all our conformance resources here. And in just a few seconds, we'll see our guide. All right, it took a little longer. All right, we've got our guide now. Now we could basically just go and check out that guide. You can see it generated quite a few files. So we could just open the guide. So open, we're going to use ./output/index.html. And we'll take a look at our guide. And here's our first implementation guide for heart rate recovery. You can see all the artifacts here. Let's take a look at this artifact. And you can see a snapshot of our guide and all the terminology bindings for all of those elements. Notice we have 4 elements that must be supported. That's what we designated with our FSH rules. And if we look at the snapshot table, there's quite a few things here. We could see our must supported elements in the snapshot, category, code, subject, etc. Here's our differential table, which makes it much easier to see. Okay, category, code, subject, and value, those were all required must supported elements in our guide. And we could see an example of our guide. And so you could see this pretty easily here. And it shows you the code and the example of the guide. Now you could also get a lot more information in the quick reference guide that Sushi publishes. You can download this and print it out. It's a nice PDF guide. I strongly recommend that you check out this guide.